So let me continue with the restoration of this Toyota Celica from the year 1993. And the next thing I tried to fix was the sway bar bushings. Why? I was hearing a clanking noise coming from the rear end of the car, and doing some research, I just found out that a lot of people would say that that was the problem. So I tried to replace that rubber bushing that is there in the sway bar that is part of the suspension of the car, the rear suspension. So I tried that and see if the noise would go away. I don't think it was a major problem, but it is a component of the suspension. So I imagine that that wouldn't have to be left alone, but it had to be changed. So that's the part that I removed. And it seems that with time, that hole that is allowing the sway bar to go through gets damaged, enlarged, and it doesn't hold the sway bar properly. So they need to be changed. This car is 26 years old, so things like that happen. It was kind of hard to get it out, not because it was anything complex. It was just unscrewing the bolts and remove it. But the thing is that these are famous for breaking, especially with the cars this old. So I had to be really careful because that's part of the frame, and if I broke that thing, that would be another whole process I would have to deal with. So I was very careful, because with the research I did, I also found out that that's something that happens, and you definitely don't want that to happen. So that's one of the bushings on the left side that I removed first, and what I heard was to grease it and see if the noise goes away. Now the problem is with this is that, again, this is a very old car already, 26 years old. So greasing this part may take care of the problem for a while, or make the noise go away, but the thing is that it is really not taking care of the problem. I was looking for new bushing for this thing, and I couldn't find them. So what I finally did was to find some in the junkyard, and I replaced them. After all this work, it was not really, I mean, the noise improved a little bit, but it didn't go away. And of course, I'm not gonna say that I'm a perfectionist, but I try to do the things the best way possible, without going crazy about it. So I wanted the noise to go away completely. So I replaced them, and finally that took care of the problem. But this greasing method, it really didn't work. It really didn't get the job done completely. The noise was not as strong, but it didn't completely go away, which is what I wanted. All right, so here there was a funny moment here, because I couldn't, since the suspension, I lifted the car, so the suspension went down. It was not in an original position, so you can see me thinking there, like saying, "Uh-oh, I have a problem here. What am I gonna do?" Because I couldn't, push the sway bar in the position that it was before, so I couldn't screw the thing. So I was thinking, that moment where you saw me like stopping and thinking, I was really thinking, what am I gonna do now? So I came up with the solution. Most of the times, if you stop and you take it easy, you're gonna find a solution. So you're gonna see what I thought about. So it has to do with the jack. Okay. So I had a little moment there, as you can see. And usually when you don't quite know what you're doing, like myself, because I'm no mechanic, and I don't have any training. Everything I've learned from research and whatever I hear and whatever I found out, the repair manual a little bit. Then I go to YouTube, and I go read from forums or whatever, and you find out many solutions from there. But what I thought is to lift the suspension itself, and that's what you're gonna see. So once I lifted the suspension, I solved the problem. The sway bar went up, and I could screw the bolts back again. But it was definitely an oh moment. Like, what am I gonna do now? But thank goodness, it was solved. So you should screw these bolts by hand. Again, they tend to break, so you have to be really careful because they are, as I said, part of the frame. I used the impact gun once I started them by hand, and once I reached the top, yeah, those are the bolts, so once I reached the point where I have to tighten them, I use a wrench. Just be careful. But yeah, after I was done, I replaced the tire, and I moved on to something else. I wouldn't say that I wasted my time. I learned things, but it didn't quite solve the problem of the clanking noise. But at least I tried, and that led me to get the other bushings and from the junkyard, and it finally worked. So if you are hearing a clanking noise, that's the problem. That may be the problem. So this is another thing. This is a resonator. I found it in another Celica in the junkyard, and I was always curious about that. Behind the air filter, on top of the air filter, what was that? And by doing some research, I found out that was a resonator, and it's just it was blocked by this cap, and I could recognize it when I got it out. It was, it fits so perfectly there that it was actually, it looked like it was part of the car, but that was a cap. That was a spray cap, or one of those, brake cleaner sprays or something like that, bottles. That was the cap. But when I installed this resonator thing, I didn't really notice a difference. But I'm not gonna, act like I know more than engineers. Toyota engineers, they know what they're doing. So if that thing was there, it had a purpose. All right. So then I moved on to the stick shift. And lever, and I tried to apply some grease, since I had it all exposed because I was doing something else. The cover for that thing, I found another one from a newer Celica, and I had to do some modifications, but you're gonna see it now. But I figured that it wouldn't hurt to apply some grease in there, since it was exposed. I never cleaned it very well, or did a very exhaustive job in there. It is not giving me any problems, so I decided to just put some grease in there and call it a day, for that. But then you're gonna see the cover that I found. It was a leather one, nicer than what the car came with, which was one of the ugliest things, in the car. To be honest with you, that makes a big difference. Now it looks much better, and I was pretty satisfied, even though I had to modify a couple of things because it didn't quite fit, since it was not the same model, but it still worked for me, and it looks much better. I'm pretty satisfied with the results. All right, so this is not a JDM car. I was sitting in the passenger car. The next thing was this connector. All right, so the mechanic, what he did was to say that the alternator needed to be replaced. So when he brought it, he brought a mess you're gonna see now. But the first thing you need to do is to disconnect the battery. Why? because if the connectors, even if the car is not running, or if the key is not in the ignition, those connections that go, run to the alternator, if they touch, they're gonna create sparks. So this is the job that he did. I mean, when I saw this, I knew there was something wrong with that. That's electrical tape. There should be a connection like this one in there. So the terminals should go inside of there, and that connection should go and connect into the alternator. So that's what he did. Electrical tape. He didn't say anything. He didn't say, well, I couldn't find a connection, or I was not going to buy the connection because I didn't feel I don't know, something. Just let me know that this was not done the right way. There's a lot of heat in those engines, and the alternator went bad because of probably the heat of those engines. They are known for that problem. They blow the alternators up because all the heat that they create. Apparently the shield is not that good. So you should have at least told me that that was not done properly, and that I needed to replace it down the road, and even offer his help, or something. I'm no mechanic, as I said before, so I shouldn't have to be figuring out, these things by myself, So it doesn't hurt me either, because in the process I learned. So, after I took those that work of art, those electrical that electrical tape, removed it. The connectors were exposed, and it was smooth job, to be honest with you. It didn't go, nothing was complicated at all. Those three connectors, if they touch, they're gonna spark. So that's why you need to disconnect the battery. So once you insert them into the connector, and the connector inserted into the alternator, once I did that, I went from a very ugly looking connection that was really exposed into a much better looking setup, which is obviously how it should look. All right. So I went from this mess in the connection, from that mess into this, which looks much better. So this is the final job. This is how it should look. Okay, this is how it should look, as opposed to the previous mess. So after you're done, you connect the battery, and everything was working great. So stay tuned for the next video about this restoration of this 93 Celica, Toyota Celica. It is already a classic car, and the more I work on it, the more I love it. And you're gonna see the upcoming videos. I'm gonna be painting some parts and working with the antenna. Thank you.